Hajimemashite, watashi wa Sakato desu. I don't really speak Japanese. It's very sad. Um, this is Tangents, and it's been now, holy shit, like going on weeks since I got back from Japan. And I have to say, I've meant for a while to record one of these kind of about my experiences and my thoughts, and haven't had the chance to do it yet. Or I've had the chance, I guess, but I haven't been quite moved above the sort of baseline of other things I wanted to talk about. But I had lunch with Gil yesterday, and since I've been like without a paycheck, for now going on 6 pay cycles, like a quarter of the year, I think. Gil has been very generously buying me lunch, and so in some sense I feel like he's my patron at the moment, and I feel some obligation to give him what he's asking for, and he's asking for one of these on Japan. So that's going to be the topic for today. I'll probably do some tangents from there because that's what I do. But I wanted to generally take a little bit of time and reflect on some thoughts that I had. I mean, overall, obviously, and I've said this many times before, but wherever you go, there you are, right? The world, there's a tendency, I think, that some people have that, oh, if I go someplace, things will be massively better or worse. And generally speaking, people will counter with, well, wherever you go, there you are. You're the common denominator in all of your whatever, any of your problems, and yeah, that's true. It's absolutely true. And I also certainly don't want to imply that Japan is by any means great. I mean, I could go on a very long diatribe about all the problems that they have there. I mean, they don't have same-sex marriage, for example. Misogyny is very common and open. Technology and everything that, when I was younger, they were supposed to be at the forefront and all of this, and it was like, ooh, they're like living in the future. And unfortunately, partly because of the culture where older people are running things and older people get deferred to excessively, I would say, they have a situation where things have kind of stagnated and perhaps regressed. So there are many, many problems. And they also, of course, have the population situation, which is net negative population growth. And all of the cities other than, I think, Tokyo are having significant negative population growth, which to some extent doesn't sound so bad, but when you think about how our economy is sort of a pyramid scheme, it is an interesting thing. Like the entire essentially duration, not only of my life, but the 20th century and to some extent the 19th century, the entire global economy has basically just been built on continuous rapid growth and expansion. And it's just not sustainable fundamentally. No matter, as soon as you learn that, okay, well, on the first day you'll give me 1 grain of rice, and the second day you'll give me 2 grains of rice, and then 4, and then 8, and so on. When you're a kid, you hear that, and then by the end of the month, it's like, oh my God, you're going to get executed because that's too many grains of rice. And they didn't realize how exponential growth works. Exponential growth fundamentally, even anything above unity, anything above just steady state, means that you're going to hit a wall at some point, sooner or later. Just fundamentally, the universe is finite. Our ability to access resources is finite. The number of people that can exist is finite. The amount of stuff you can make and consume is finite. Energy is finite, all of this. So at some point, you're going to hit some limit. And it's kind of amazing how fast and how long things have gone. But we are hitting some fundamental limits, at least in terms of current technology and our economy and all of this. So that endless growth and the idea that each generation expands relative to the previous generation And so the new generations can kind of cover the, well, ideally take care of the older ones. It only works as long as you don't have that population inversion. And when you start getting that, which is kind of an inevitable consequence of hitting a certain level of development, it's it's actually an accomplishment in terms of civilization that once you get to a certain point, people stop reproducing that much. If you're in a place where your kids are likely to die, or more likely to die than not, you end up having a lot of kids. When you're in a place where, oh, I have a farm and I need labor, and your kids are sort of a form of cheap labor, you likely have more kids than not. When you're in a place where women have no control over their ability to reproduce, you end up having a lot more kids. As soon as women get empowered and are able to control reproduction and not become a baby factory, that magically crashes. So there are things that, and in fact, tends to go below replacement rate. Now, there are good and bad things about that. Of course, if you're just in the same sense that exponential growth is bad, exponential decay means eventually you'll hit integers like low single digits and then zero. I don't think we're anywhere near having to worry about that. And people, you get people like Trump or Musk will talk about that and they'll be like, oh, the population will complete. It's like, probably not. It's one of these things like the Samuel Clements had this extrapolation thing about the Mississippi, and it was just projecting, like linearly projecting over time, if these trends continue, what will happen. And it just was a reductio ad absurdum kind of argument, but it gives you a sense of like, it's probably, there are other factors that are going to come in. Recently, actually, this is a weird tangent, but Netflix has a bunch of customers, and many customers, including, like, I have not had a Netflix subscription in probably like a decade, for a couple of reasons, but one of them being that my mom has a Netflix subscription. I live in Phoenix, and I've been using her subscription for quite a many years. And part of that was because I just couldn't afford one, and then for a long time it was just I didn't want to. And then it was like, well, Netflix is pushing Dave Chappelle and a bunch of transphobes and a bunch of other, like pretty bad stuff. I don't really want to support that, but I'll still kind of, passively do it because I'm not paying for it, and I could justify that to myself, even though it's one of those things where you kind of justify it to yourself, but you're still tacitly supporting them. And certainly also the fact that I never said, like, maybe you should cancel your subscription. It's more to make me feel good than anything. It's certainly not moving the needle. But they did this thing, and you can just see the thought process. Some executive, surely with an MBA or some stupid finance degree, had a spreadsheet, and they're like, well, it turns out that of all of our subscriptions, the average one is in like 2-point-something households. And so if we could just capture the revenue from even a fraction of that, even like, and I mean, you can just see the thought process. They're like, well, hell, if we got 20% of those extra households, because they're thinking doing this is not going to cost them anything, then we would have this massive increase in revenue. And so they decided, okay, well, we're going to impose this thing where if you don't sign in from the same network once within 30 days, then you're going to get locked out. And the idea being, well, now you're going to have to get a subscription if you're not living in the same place. There was a massive pushback because of this. And, I mean, obviously, it's just like the depths of stupidity of these finance bros who just, like, you can see they're kind of, it's like with all of these fucking layoffs right now. Or, you go to Boeing is a great example. Companies run by engineers, they do really good engineering, and then the finance bros come in and they're like, well, why are we investing in all of these things? Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? And, we can save a lot of money if we do this. And they're not seeing past that spreadsheet, and they're not thinking like, well, what are the consequences of doing this? What are the consequences of cutting engineering? What are the consequences of, well, I mean, the 737 MAX thing is kind of a good example of this. You have finance bros, funnily enough, finance bros at Boeing talking to the finance bros at Southwest, and they're like, well, the finance bros at Southwest don't want to pay to get the pilots trained on a new airframe. And the finance bros at Boeing are like, well, hell, we'll just take the 737 and we'll, kind of muck it up a little bit so that we can get better efficiency, but, cheat with some software. And then you won't have to train new people, or you train your people again. And they're like, yay, patting each other on the back and jerking each other off and probably doing blow off of each other's asses. And they're doing that. And they don't think, well, there's a reason why when you change the dynamics of an aircraft, you have to retrain pilots. It's not like somebody just decided like, oh, well, maybe it would be good to have this extra training because it's going to make money for. I mean, the thinking of these people is so shallow and so just, it's pathetic. They're not considering stuff. It's like playing chess with somebody who would lose at one player tic-tac-toe. Like truly. You just look at it and you're like, imagine what happens when you do this and what are the consequences of that. And then you realize, oh, well, maybe the reason that we do this, and that, yeah, training costs something, but it saves lives. And not only that, if you make the new aircraft, you train your pilots, and then you don't have a couple planes crashing and killing people and, causing a huge human cost, but also causing a huge economic cost. Like, even if you give only a shit about money, having your reputational damage from killing a bunch of people, it's kind of a big deal. And they don't think about that. It doesn't even enter into their thought process, into their minds that, like maybe this isn't the best thing to do 5 years down the line. And I mean, so getting back to Japan, this is one thing that, it's a pro and a con, but one thing that I think Japan does, at least to some extent, do that the US doesn't do very well is kind of think on a longer term basis. Now, longer term not being like 100 years, 50 years, but longer term being, like past the current election cycle. The current president is not just mucking with the launch system and the mission to the moon and all of this every time, and then redirecting NASA every 4 years. They're thinking a little bit beyond themselves, and that process gets you good public transportation. It gets you high-speed rail that goes across the country. Now, the counter of this is, of course, they have massive. These things that should be public goods, really clearly should be, are all owned by private companies. They've got a bunch of separate private companies, and they're all kind of competitors, but they're kind of working together. And now, you can have a Suica card or I think it's called Pasmo. You can have one of these cards. I had Suica, and go pretty much anywhere in the country even, and use that pretty much anywhere. And they've all kind of worked it out, but for a long time, you had to pay, like get a different ticket to go on this line and that line, and you'd have to transfer, and it was a mess. And it's just one of these things that, I mean, the ideal in the US is always like, oh, we got to privatize everything. Got to have it run by corporations, and the corporations will make it efficient and all that bullshit. And you just see some of the problems with that. And again, like the idea works in a kind of cartoon sketch understanding of the universe where you have no understanding or no ability to project a couple steps forward. And you imagine that the market is actually making rational decisions, which is crazy. B, you imagine that there are no negative or positive externalities. So cost is directly coupled to, like the monetary cost is directly, and in the short term, coupled to long-term expenses, long-term costs, and all of this. And then you're doing this optimization problem. And if you think about it in the most like sketchy kind of toy model way, it seems like a great plan, although it falls apart very, very quickly. And it's one of these things like, I don't know, it's frustrating to me how much this whole just idiotic, childish view of economics and I'll tell you, I'm not just trying to pick on those people. Yeah, the objectivists and all of these idiots. Um, People who are like super into communism have the same problem. And I mean, communism actually is not bad if you have like essentially free labor and free ability to like if you have automation to the point where all of the daily needs are essentially covered. It works. It works pretty well. When you start having, you've completely decoupled markets out of things and you've completely removed costs and all of this kind of stuff, things go badly in a different way. And I mean, and to me, the commonality between these groups and the commonality between all of these finance bros and all of this is that they have just this surface level, simple, I don't know if understanding is the right word, but kind of notional, something where they think they have a model of how things work. And it's a model based not on human nature or fundamental physics or economics or anything like that. It's based on, well, in my perfect platonic ideal of the world, this is how things work. And in that system, as long as I don't think too hard about it, then everything just magically works out. And the reality is, no, it doesn't. Not at all. Like if you have totally, like I don't want to get into either of these too much because it's A, it's a quagmire, and B, what am I going to say that's new? But if you think about bureaucracy, my former partner is transitioning, and part of that is changing his name now. And that legal name change goes through a lot of bureaucracy. Now, it's good that we have the ability to do it and that we're in a country where, and a time where that's possible. And yeah, I mean, it is a thing, like you look at progress, things are certainly not a straight line. There is regression, but there are certain things that have moved forward. Now, it's also horrifying to see like Trump and a bunch of Republicans trying to scapegoat trans people, among others, but like pick this sort of marginalized group who people do care about them, but the problem is, I think this is the general problem with, or one of the general problems with libs. They kind of care about people on the surface enough to do almost nothing and kind of, have the get that little checkbox that you cared, but not actually go to bat for somebody. And this is why after all the Black Lives Matter protests, we end up electing Crime Bill Joe and Top Cop Kamala. Yeah. But anyway, I'm very annoyed by that whole situation. But going back to this is a scapegoated group. They're marginalized, but there's still a small enough population, and they have enough people that are kind of indifferent that the Republicans can pick on them and attack them and do all of this kind of stuff. And there aren't enough people pushing back. And if they are pushing back, they're only kind of like marginally pushing back. So you can go pretty far with the harm that you do by not, I mean, I guess it's one of the reasons why people pick scapegoats. And you don't want to pick your you don't want to be in Germany and have your scapegoat population be blonde-haired, blue-eyed, tall people. You want to pick some small group of people that the majority of the population, or even the supermajority of the population, can look at themselves in the mirror and say like, well, I'm not that person. And they can even go like, well, I know and care about this person a little bit, but not enough to actually do anything about it or put myself at any risk. So anyway, I'm rambling on about things. It's kind of weird how impossible it is for me to stay on a topic. Uh, getting back to Japan. I I would say my biggest takeaway, and especially, there's Tokyo and then there's the rest of the country. When I was in Tokyo, which was like 3 of my 4 weeks, um, I was in Tokyo, and it is remarkable when you're in the city and you look in every direction, and all the way to the horizon is still city. Now, in Phoenix, it's true as well, kind of, but it's more like urban sprawl. So, in terms of population density, it's very low, but there are just people kind of spread out. But, if I walked across Phoenix, most of the places that I would be, I mean, in addition to just being a literal desert, they're kind of a desert of like, there's nothing there. There's a bunch of residential stuff, but there's nothing for me to do there. There's nothing for me to see there. There's nothing to interact with. You can walk across Tokyo or London or Paris, and they do have like a residential neighborhood or something that's not as interesting. But almost everywhere, there's stuff to do, there's stuff to see, and that density gets you something. The density also makes it possible and reasonable to have public transit. If you have, in Phoenix, absent a lot of automation, if you had like a high-speed rail going across the city, or like a subway kind of system, most of the trains, most of the time, would be empty if they had any frequency at all. And part of that is just you're not moving enough people from one place to another. And we've built the city around cars to such an extent that that flux of people going back and forth is sort of what we need to sustain things. And so there's just, it's a limit on how dense things can get here, but it's also a limit on how much you can rely on public transit, because as crowded as our freeways are, and this is true of LA as well, as crowded as the freeways are and as annoying as that is, if you took all of those cars away and you put all those people in trains, you wouldn't need that many trains. And then the problem becomes, well, okay, if you have those trains and you have the right number of trains for the flow of people, then either the frequency is very low, which makes the trains very inconvenient to use, or the frequency is high and the trains have to be small, which is kind of a silly use of resources. And it's just one of these things. Now, granted, if you do that, then magically the density can start increasing, because one of the limits to how dense we can make things is just people fundamentally, if you know that you can't get from A to B in a reasonable amount of time, probably decreases your incentive significantly to densify things. So Tokyo, and they obviously have a lot of history and reasons that, like things are kind of clustered there, and there are limits, like natural geographic limits to how far you can go, at least in the water direction. And so there are things that kind of force density to exist there. And the history, Phoenix, most of Phoenix, and I think this is it'd be interesting to see the growth, but most of the city 20 years ago didn't exist. 40 years ago, where I am now, was just fields of farm. And I don't know that you have to go, I think this place was built in the 80s or the 90s, and around me there are places which were built in the 2000s. You don't have to go back that far, and things just didn't exist here, like fundamentally. I mean, obviously something existed, but it wasn't a city. There's no natural barrier that keeps it from getting bigger. People have cars, which means they can, in principle, go from A to B. And of course, absent traffic, if you have a car, getting from here even to the center of Phoenix is not that bad. And we have a certain expectation of like how long things take. So there's nothing really driving either the density or the public transit here. Older cities have the advantage and disadvantage of having things already kind of crystallizing based more on like human scale transit. And so that forces a certain amount of density. You can't have, you know, Paris at a certain point. Versailles is like out there, like out there. Now, today with RER, it's not a big deal. It's a pretty quick trip. But there was a time when people were just like either walking or taking horse carriages and, you know, this kind of stuff. Getting from central Paris to Versailles, central Paris to Versailles, was like a journey. It, I mean, it's not like crossing the United States, but it was a hike. Versus now, if you have a car or you get on the train, it's not even a thing. You barely notice it. And that naturally kind of made cities denser, which helped them when they were starting to build public transit, because that density means any train line that you build intrinsically is going to have a lot of flux on it, a lot of traffic, and that traffic drives, you know, means ridership, which means whatever means you're using to pay for it, whether it's government funded or, you know, individual tickets, it's going to make sense. Versus here, if you had automation to the point where you could just, I mean, you could imagine you have a fusion reactor and they're compact and efficient and safe and all of this, and you have artificial intelligence to the point where you could just completely make Phoenix tunneled with subway lines. And all of those subway lines are clean and big, and they have high-speed trains that go from A to B. And by the way, you know, I mean, you have fusion, so now you can have smaller trains, and you have automation, which means that you can even do point-to-point routing on those kinds of things. And you get this sort of situation where at some point in the future, even at the densities that we have here, assuming things don't blow up, you could do this. But it doesn't really work absent that. Like, you know, if you were the dictator of Phoenix and even imagine like you had the police budget, which is almost $1 billion a year, and you just get rid of them because obviously they're just a parasite. You get rid of them, and now you're using that. You still couldn't build, it's depressing to think this, but you couldn't really build a metro system in Phoenix that was worth that much of a damn. It would be better. You could do much better. You could certainly, like the light rail that we have, extend it from Mesa through Gilbert, extend it through Scottsdale, maybe make a branch or two on it. You could do some things, but the sparsity and the scale and scope of the city basically means that it would be like $1 trillion project. And I'm not even joking, but like that kind of scale, even without the absurd costs of building transit in Phoenix, to really give something where everyone in Phoenix is like a 5-minute walk from a train station that can take them anywhere in the town. And with a frequency where I mean, this is a thing. When you're in Tokyo, and also true of like Paris or London or New York to some extent, you go to the train station, you don't need to know the schedule. You just know, I get there and in a few minutes, maybe 3, maybe 5, maybe on at low frequency times it's like 7 minutes and you have to really wait a long time. But you get there and there's a train coming, and that train will take you where you're going. And you know, it will be as fast as driving and probably faster because the traffic would suck and all of this. That is a thing that I don't know that I mean, you could build toward it, and it's a reasonable goal, but I don't know that you could get there. And the fact that you have so many people here pushing back against it, like even just having that light rail extension into Gilbert, which again, I do believe is going to come at some point. But instead of being in a couple years, it's going to be like 20 years or 10 years. That extension into Scottsdale, you know, it's going to come. It's stupid not to do it. But it's going to be a long time before it actually happens because people are pushing back. And then in addition to that, you have the sparsity that you're like, we do have little clusters that are dense. And in time, when you build, I mean, what I think will happen is the light rail gets built. People start realizing, oh, well, we can, and you can see a little bit like Tempe is kind of showing this, where it's getting denser and becoming a bit of a real city. It's kind of interesting, actually. Like if you go to Tempe, certainly in the time that I've been here, which is now, decades, it's gone from being kind of like a small little college town to actually feeling a little bit like a proper city. And it's not hard to run the clock forward and think like, well, more and more people start moving there because now you have the transit, you have the density, and the density kind of begets density, especially when you can get in and out easily. And I mean, the fact also, and I hate this a little bit, but when you're in central Tempe, getting to the freeway is not a big deal. And once you're there, they also have some public transit. The light rail in Phoenix, I don't know. The difference between like the Phoenix light rail, which does not have right of way and is basically like, it's kind of like a slow bus, essentially running on the streets, versus you get on a train in Tokyo, and that fucking train is giant, like ridiculously long, full of people, and very fast. I mean, comparatively, it's just night and day. Like if there was a Yamanuchi line from here to, say, Tempe, it'd probably be like a 10-minute ride or something. And if the light rail came out here, it would be like a half hour, 45, like literally 45 minutes to get from here to Tempe. And you think about that, it's nice. It's better than nothing. Like if I could walk to downtown Gilbert, get on the light rail, go to Tempe, I would do it sometimes. But it's hard to, when that's competing against being in a car, and that car, if there's traffic, it's different. But if there's no traffic, I can get to downtown Tempe in 20 minutes. And so, you can put a little bit of margin on that for, okay, you're gonna walk, and you understand that you don't have to deal with parking and all this, and you have the freedom and flexibility to come and go as you please. And there are a lot of advantages to public transit, but those advantages aren't worth more than doubling the travel time. And that's the problem here. Whereas in a city like Tokyo, you can be anywhere in Tokyo, get on a train, maybe transfer to another train, and get off, and then you're anywhere else in Tokyo. And certainly you're going to be there. You can easily cross the city faster than you could in a car, even with the transfer time and even with the walking time. And that's without dealing with parking and all of that. It's just a different proposition. And it's unfortunate. And then we have such a car culture, and people are so just, I don't know, indoctrinated into this idea that everybody has to have their own car. It's like, you're not, it's kind of a funny thing. Hey, somebody shared a video on Instagram, I don't know, a couple days ago. And it was a song in it, a kind of old song now. And that song is, I can't remember exactly what she said. All money is legal. But it's like, how are we going to get round on your bus pass? And you think about it, and to me, on one hand, you being from this country, you think about that and it seems totally sensical. It makes sense, it's of course. On the other hand, if you were in Paris and you just have a Navigo pass, if you're in London and you have the Oyster card, if you're in Tokyo and you have a Suica, you can get around the city in a way that I would say it's almost easier and faster than if you had a car, and certainly more pleasant. I mean, I keep thinking about, like, if I didn't have a car here, like especially where I live now, I do walk every day. Sometimes I even go up to like 15, 20,000 steps, but I'm walking in circles in fucking residential neighborhoods and seeing the same shit over and over again. if I was here and I didn't have a car, there is a Safeway over there, and it's like a 15-minute walk. I've done it before. It's a long walk, and there's nothing in between. There's a school and some other residential stuff, but it's just like you feel in a desert. I keep using that word, but you feel so far out from anything, and everything is so spread out, and there's just nothing there. And then we have this kind of anti-pedestrian culture where you feel like, I don't know what this is exactly, but when you're walking around Phoenix, there are exceptions to this. If you're walking in like downtown Scottsdale in a certain tiny little strip, or you're walking in downtown Phoenix or downtown Tempe, you don't feel like this. But if you're walking on the street that I'm walking on over here to Safeway, you feel like you're a crazy person, like there's something wrong with you for doing that. And you kind of feel pathetic because you're like, oh, when I was doing that, my car, basically I blew a gasket on my Prius and it essentially totaled the car and it became undrivable. So I had no car for like, I don't know, a month or two, or a couple months. And I did manage it. Like there were things that I could do. It was kind of surprising how much, even in these circumstances, you can get around without a car. But it's much less pleasant to do here. Whereas if you were in central Tokyo, and there are different places where you could be, like there are some places, I spent most of my time on the west side. Yeah, sorry for the gang symbol. But I spent most of my time on the west side of Tokyo, and I think it's a little bit, it's one of these things where there are different regions and they have different kinds of feels and different, specialties and things. Where I was, I could easily live there. I spent a little bit of time on the sort of east and south side, and it's a little bit more just like residential and sparse. Like you could still do it, but the walk to any place was further. The walk to a train station was still close, but it wasn't as nice, and there wasn't as much around it. So it's not like it's perfect. You'd have to pick and choose where you lived. But where I was, I was thinking like if I had no car here and I didn't have a car there and I was just living, I'd actually enjoy it more. And it's kind of lovely to be able to just go downstairs and walk on the sidewalk, and then you go eat, or you go get a coffee, or you go do all of the stuff that I would normally do during the day. Versus here, if I didn't have a car, getting to coffee. Obviously make coffee at home, Scott. Okay, I'm not going to do that. But if I didn't have a car here, getting to coffee, and I did do it when I didn't have a car, but it was like a half hour, 40-minute walk to get to the next coffee shop that I normally go to versus a short drive. And it's the difference between being a pleasant kind of 5-10 minute walk and have like 20 options of coffee, like without almost exaggeration, or a half hour, and most of the time between here and there, there's just nothing. Which is kind of nice, I guess, if you want to have some space and open up. But, and this was another thing actually, my hotel room, I got kind of lucky, I guess. I spent some time doing research, so it's not like I can just totally disavow any agency in this. But the hotel that I got there was not, it was one of the cheaper ones I could find without being like super, super cheap. It was like $100 a day. So you could get much cheaper. It wasn't like a capsule hotel or any of that. But I had a washer dryer in the place, and the layout of the space was, I don't know how to, it's weird how if you had a similarly sized hotel here, you'd feel so cramped. And yet there, it was actually a pretty efficient use of space and pretty comfortable. I was sort of stunned by that. Now, it's not all, central Tokyo is obviously a big, dense place, or, like the slight outskirts, big, dense place. There's not a lot of room to move. So, it's more like New York. You're not like able to spread out, so you have constraints. Although I've been in hotels in New York and they felt small and cramped. They were probably comparable room size to this, or even maybe bigger. But I felt good about that. And to such an extent that I had that place, and then I had that place for I think 2 or 3 weeks. I think it must have been like 2.5 weeks. And then I was going to Osaka and Kyoto and Nagano, and then I was coming back, and I didn't have something booked. And when I was there, I was like, shit, I'm gonna book this place again because also it was right next to 5 minute walk from a train station, nice road, um, yeah, not a bad place. I feel like if I would have picked one that was on the opposite side of the city, I wouldn't have been as happy. If I would have picked one, especially like I spent one night between between Kyoto and Nagano, went back to Tokyo for a night, and I got a hotel in this other part just to see what it was like. And yeah, it definitely showed me, yeah, it wouldn't, if I was living in that area, I'd feel more, certainly, I mean, compared to Gilbert, I wouldn't feel like I was out in the desert, but you feel a little bit more like it. I could have probably had a bigger place there, so you're, but there's a trade-off between, do you have a comfortable space, and it was small but comfortable, or do you have a lot of space and getting anywhere is a nightmare. So that distance and the density is a thing I really liked. The one thing that I appreciated a lot was the masking. This was honestly, I had several reasons for going to Japan, and one of the things was I was thinking I hadn't gone on a trip in a couple years, not just because of the pandemic, but just like I've not had free time. Uh, and the last trip that I took was just like meetings the whole fucking trip, which was annoying. But I was thinking, okay, I'm going to go to Europe. And then I was looking at the gas prices and the heating gas prices in London and all of this, and kind of going like, I don't really want to do it. My business partner, his girlfriend is Japanese. They were going to spend some time in Japan. So I had some people I could meet up with a couple of times. Yeah, and then I was thinking like, yeah, what am I going to do? But the thing that really made me pull the trigger on that more than anything was I kept seeing pictures of people in Japan wearing masks. And yeah, anywhere I go here, and I will say I am not the only person wearing a mask here. There are people wearing masks. It's not like nobody's doing it. But it's so close to nobody. It's really pathetic. It's just like you go places and yeah, okay, there's a person and you're like, yes, you're the one. But 20, 30 people in between are not wearing masks. And so you're like, this is not a great situation here. You're just kind of like, ugh. And I mean, to some extent, I will say this is illusory because when I was there, I went to several of the drugstores, and I was looking at masks, and I realized most of the masks they have are not like KN95s. They're not the super high quality masks. They're not sealing that well around your face. They're not, as good as they could be. And you would see a lot of people like not really wearing them very well and all of this. So it's not like people were perfect about it by any means. And also a lot of people, they're wearing the masks, but they're kind of like, I don't really like this. But they're still wearing them. So I don't want to imply that, like it's perfect compliance. There were a couple people not masking, although very, very rare. But, and the masking's not perfect. But I would much rather have somebody have, and they were at least like surgical mask quality or better. If that person, and you would not generally see people who were sick kind of out doing stuff, or if they were definitely masked. Whereas here, I'll see sick people outside not masked. There was a sick motherfucker on the airplane coming back, and they were requiring masks, and American, of course. This motherfucker, couple seats over, in the seat back, he's sick, visibly sick, and he keeps having his mask down below his nose. And then I look over a couple of times and he's got no mask on at all. And I just like, I'm not a violent person. I would not actually like strangle the guy, but yeah, I once, if somebody came by and strangled him and beat the shit out of him, I would kind of enjoy it. Yeah, I'm sitting there looking at that and I'm like, motherfucker, why can you, like, what is it that makes you feel that you have the freedom and the liberty to expose everybody around you to God knows what the fuck you have? Now maybe it's just a cold, maybe it's just the flu, air quotes, just the flu. Whatever it is, I don't fucking want it. And you have a mask and you're on a plane where everybody else is fucking masked and they're, you know, I mean, people don't like it. It's not like they're loving it, but they're wearing it. Why can't you do it? Like, it just, it disgusted me. And really, you know, you see that and just, I don't know, I don't feel great about my country. And that really, you know, kind of like solidified it. It's like, selfish, pig-headed motherfucker. Just put on your fucking, like, the thing that gets me, the thing that really kills me is like, I'm not saying fundamentally change who you are as a human being. I'm saying just like make the barest effort to at least kind of show that you're trying not to be a giant jackass. You know, like do the smallest little thing that is not a big deal to show that you're not trying to, and not just show, but actually like here, to not put everybody around you at risk that is completely preventable. It's just, it just makes me, it makes me so frustrated. And yeah, and again, not perfect. There are lots of things that you could criticize. You know, I mean, the misogyny is definitely a thing. There's a lot of loneliness there. So this is a double-edged sword, but there are a lot of people who are just kind of like lonely. I don't want to use the word incels, but there are a lot of dudes, especially, who are just kind of like there and they're alone. And they probably need some human companionship. And so you get weird things like the hostess, I don't know what they're called, hostess restaurants or hostess bars or whatever. And it's like a bar that you go to, and I think they have them for women too. But there are just people like hanging out there, and it's their job that you're buying them food and drinks and stuff and just kind of hanging out with you and simulating that social interaction, which is very sad, I find. I guess if you feel good about it and you enjoy it, it's like going to a strip club. If you enjoy that and you get off from it, yeah, more power to you. That's fine. I just find it a little, I don't know. I don't have, there's something about me where I just don't have the ability to turn off. I don't have that suspension of disbelief that lets me enjoy that. I would just totally know, yeah, this is complete. I mean, even hell, I go to coffee shops and people are nice and they're friendly, but I'm also very cognizant of the fact that I'm paying this person for this transaction and they're rated on their friendliness and they're rated, yeah, and also being in the US, a significant amount of their income is coming from tips. And so people have to be friendly. So people will come here and they'll be like, oh, people are so friendly here. And yeah, I mean, to some extent, yeah. It's an interesting thing when you know people from other countries and they've spent some time here, because the first impression is, oh yeah, people are just friendly here. And then later on you realize it's very superficial kind of friendliness. And it's very transactional as well. It's like, oh, if I'm friendly, then I get a better tip. And then again, versus plenty of waiters there were very friendly, and you know, like sushi chef, very friendly. But you don't feel, it felt more real to me, because it's not like, oh, if you're friendly, you're going to get a better tip. It's just like, oh, I'm just a friendly person. And I like that so much more. I don't like that extra layer of, I don't like that it's transactional. I don't like that it's, you know, like, and I know people who will be like, oh, in France, I hate it when, you know, the waiters are just not like sucking your ass all the time. It's like, I would rather that. I would rather it be like, this is their job. and they're doing their job and they're doing the things for you. And if they want to be friendly or they happen to, like get along with you, then that's great. But it's not like it's a part of their thing. And I do understand, like it can be annoying if you're, I mean, in France, you want the bill or something, l'addition s'il vous plaît. It's a little bit more of a challenge to get, or if you want to order something new, something like that. There's a protocol to it, but it's a little hard. In Japan, this is a weird one, but they have the sumimasen, sumimasen, and then somebody comes and takes care of you, or better is like you look at them and you make a little gesture or something. And so that kind of thing, yeah, I like it so much more. And the idea, I don't know, it is true still that, like if you're friendly, then maybe somebody will come back. So there's some sort of like tertiary transactional nature to that, but it's at least easier to believe than, oh, if you're not friendly, or if this person is just like a cheap tipper, or they're having a bad day or whatever, you might not make any money from that table. And if it's a big table and they don't pay you, that's a significant chunk of your income. Or if they pay you well, your income is based on just the whims of some random person who does not have any relationship with you other than that time that you're spending together while you're eating. That's fucked up. Like, it's just so. And the thing about it also is, like, maybe one day we could fix it, but the tipping culture is so just imbued into the US culture. It would be very hard to get rid of. And I would love to get rid of that. I'm not a person also who like does the math. I don't like. I'm not in a position where I like have to like count. Okay, can I afford this? Can I not? Even in my current situation, pretty close to it, but I'm not quite there. And still, when you go to a restaurant here or you go to a store or whatever, you have sales tax, which I'm not saying there shouldn't be sales tax. Sales tax is fine, although it is a regressive tax. That's a whole other discussion. But you see the price, and then on top of that, there's a sales tax and some other stuff. And then if you're in a restaurant, there's also tip. And so you have to do mental math between like, well, what is the price of this and what is the actual price of this? And then what is the tip on top? And it's just like extra cognitive load versus there, you would see the price and that's just the price you pay. And I mean, it's even in Europe, you'll leave like, €1 or two some places. In Japan, I tried that the first night that I was there. I left like a European style tip, and they ran back after me and are like, "Hey, you forgot this." It taught me my lesson and made a very strong impression. Like after that never left any kind of tip beyond what was just included. And it's nice. It's so nice not to have to do that math. And I'm not complaining like, oh, calculating 25, 30% on top of whatever this is. It's not like the giant mental gymnastics. It's not Olympiad for math. But it's like just a little extra twist of annoyance. Every place you go, everything you do, every interaction you have, they're all, and I guess there is there they don't have that transactional nature, but they do have the public face, private face thing, which, is annoying as well. So again, and I will say actually, I spent a night, spent a couple nights in, I can never say this word right, and I'm going to say it worse because I'm also shining a light on it, but in a Riken, I should just delete that and bleep it out. But like a traditional hotel. And in that hotel, first off, no bed, because it's like, you'll leave for dinner and then you'll come back and then you have a futon kind of set up. And then you'll leave in the morning for breakfast and you come back and it's like set up as a room. That part, even knowing it's coming, is a little bit perturbing. I got so lucky Like when I was in, I went. I feel dumb for having done this, but I went to the Snow Monkey Park, and it's. I'm not saying it's like the best thing in the world, and it was a giant pain in the ass to get out there. It took on the Shinkansen from Tokyo to Nagano. That was like a couple hour train ride, and it was a good distance and fast train. And also, those fucking trains come like they have a new train like every 15 minutes. You could literally, I mean, there's a thing. You could literally go to Tokyo Station, not have a ticket, and I had the JR pass, so I got tickets just for like seat assignment, but you didn't need that. But even if you didn't have the JR pass, go to the ticket machine. Here's the train coming. Like I want to go from here to here. Okay, there's a train in 10 minutes at track 7. And then you'd get the ticket, and you'd be. The first time I did this, I was like, can I do that in 10 minutes? Can I get there? And yeah, you can go and get there, and you still have time to spare. And yeah, I mean, you could literally show up at the station 10 minutes before the ride, go out. You don't have, and again, you don't even have to plan. Like, imagine if I was going to LA and I just on a whim decided, okay, I'm just gonna take the Shinkansen to LA. And versus what would actually happen here is I'm going to take Southwest. It's going to be more expensive and a pain in the ass. And of course, I have to drive out to the airport or take a lift or something, which is expensive and slow and painful. And then when I get to LA, I've got to get a ride there, and I have to go through security and all this stuff. And it's just such a, like, the difference in experience between that bullet train and what we have. And those trains also, I mean, they're in the process of building, I think, from Tokyo to Osaka, a maglev train that's going to go like twice as fast at peak than the Shinkansen, and the Shinkansen's fast. And again, like that lack of needing security and going through all the bullshit and just being able to hop on the train and the frequency of those trains. And those trains are pretty full. It's crazy how many people are going everywhere. Like on the Tokyo subway, you see all these trains, and they're fucking long trains, and they're full of people, and there's a new one coming every 3 to 5 minutes for most of these lines. It's just a shit ton of people moving all over all the time, and it's super. Yeah, I'm not saying it's like magically the most efficient thing in the world, but it's very pleasant. And even when it's really like crowded, the only time I felt bad was when I was leaving and I had my bag and it was a little bit of rush hour. It wasn't quite the rush hour where they're like packing you into the train, but it was, densely packed when we got on. And I have my bag and I just kind of felt like I'm intruding in people's space. I felt a little bit bad there. But other than that, and you could avoid that if you wanted to, unless you had to go to or from someplace during rush hour. And you can also, like, I walked across the city so many times and around the city and all of this, and it's so nice to have those things. But that train frequency, the lack of, and the comfort on the train compared to, again, a Southwest flight is my reference. And I just think about, like, Tokyo to Osaka or Tokyo to Kyoto is about the Phoenix to LA. And then when you're in Tokyo, you've got the metro. When you're in Kyoto or Osaka, it's not as built out of a metro system, but it's still a metro system. There's still walkable cities. And, you could just, it's just frustrating to look at where we are now and the level of which, it's just the extent to which people are like, oh, well, we always want to do high-speed rail, but, then it gets, like, just fucking do it. Like, I understand there are a bunch of barriers and there are all of these, but it's again, kind of inevitable. At one point, it will happen. And, I mean, it does seem like LA to San Francisco is finally in progress, and LA to Vegas is finally eventually coming. But we're so fucking slow on it. And like these other countries have had this shit for my entire lifetime. I mean, the TGV, I think the first one was significantly before I was born. Like, I don't know if it was in the 50s or the 60s, but it's been a long fucking time. Maybe it was in the 70s, but I think it was before that. And dude, you just look at it, it's so fucking annoying. And it's just like I think part of the problem is also that people here don't travel very much. So it's an interesting thing. In addition to not having very much upward mobility or any mobility in social class in the US, people tend not to move within the country, and they much more than most places, and they tend not to visit other countries. And in that not visiting other countries, you don't see what it's like to be in a city. Yeah, I mean, you could, if you visit New York, you can kind of get a taste of what a European city is like. Maybe to some extent DC, and then not just a European, but like a proper city anywhere in the world. But yeah, if you go, you visit these places, and then you're like, motherfucker, why do things suck so much here? And what I want is people to have that reaction and then change the fucking shit. Like, this is dumb. What we're doing is dumb. Spreading out and having each, like, I get the appeal of having a big house and a big yard and all of this. The problem is that big yard is a lie. Like, all around me, there are people who have air quotes big houses, which are not that big. And then they have a yard, which is not that big. And the newer developments, they have a yard that's like a little sliver around the house. And it's really hard not to look at that and go like, if you just had a fucking park, like a proper park, and you had higher density housing, you could have a nicer place. You could be up in a building and have windows and a good view. And you could have a park right there that you don't have to take care of, by the way, because it's a public park, and that everybody else can enjoy. And you could also like walk to the coffee shop and walk to the grocery store and get on the train. And yeah, I will say, if you had limited mobility, it's harder. In Paris, yeah, I didn't notice this until like my mom was going some places. But you go to like the Sacré-Cœur metro station, and it's a fuck ton of stairs. And I think they might have had an elevator there, but there are some places where it's just not accessible at all. And it's almost like aggressively not accessible in some places. The newer stations are getting better, but the older ones, and a lot of the city, Tokyo, I think, is pretty accessible, but still not perfect. If you had limited mobility, it'd be more challenging than having a car, probably. And if you had kids, it'd probably be harder. If you had a dog and you had to take that dog to the vet, it'd be harder. There are cases where having some kind of a private car or somebody to drive you makes sense. But for the most part, especially for the bulk of your life, and if you're younger and not in those situations, it's so much nicer. It's so much fucking nicer to not have a car. And your car you have to pay for. And paying for that car, the car, like, oh, I got a cheap car, all of it. It's like, yeah, but you still have to pay gas. You have to pay for insurance. Although I discovered the person who rear-ended me in October does not have insurance, which is fucking great. I kind of feel bad to some extent because this is how I am. Somebody hit me and she ran away and tried not to, and she doesn't have insurance, so she's gonna have to pay somehow. I don't, like, can you squeeze blood from a stone? I don't know. But I feel bad, but at the same time, you should not be fucking driving if you don't have insurance. And I also understand that, okay, well, you're in our hellscape, and to not be driving really limits your ability. Like, if you live in Phoenix and you don't have a car, you have a very narrow horizon relative to if you have a car. And it's kind of depressing, I find it. Now, again, like Nagano, this was what I was starting to say anyway. The Shinkansen from Tokyo to Nagano, a couple hours. I stopped 45 minutes. I stopped kind of like almost midway and stayed the night there just to see what it was like in more rural area. And I will say, more rural area, if I was living in Japan, I would not want to live in a more rural area, or here, or really anywhere. As nice as it is to some extent to be like out, not having, they had a bus, but the bus was like an American bus where it's like every half hour, 45 minutes. They had a few lines. It was probably better than Phoenix, to be fair, but not much. and no metro and all this. Nagano, they had like a little metro station, and they had a train that took me almost to the place where I was going with the snow monkeys. But that train, uh, in addition to having to wait for it, that train was like halfway to Tokyo in terms of time, but the distance was, you look at it on a map and it's like, okay, here's a centimeter versus a decimeter. And that centimeter is almost as long as maybe, a few centimeters. Or now, granted, the Shinkansen is particularly fast and this train is particularly slow, but it was annoying. And then I got there, and it's still like a 45-minute walk, which I could have taken I took a bus back, mainly because it was icy and slick. But and when I walked up there, I fell one time. There was an older man that was like, "Oh, are you okay?" I'm fine. Although I did end up with a bit of a bruise, which I don't bruise very easily, so me getting a bruise means it was a pretty hard hit. But anyway, that was okay. But I didn't want to walk down, like, by my hotel. There's a sort of slope, and that road plus ice, I was just thinking, I'm just going to slide and fall on my ass, and that's going to be really unpleasant and embarrassing. So I took the bus back. But bus, very slow. Walking, very slow. It was nice to visit, but a pain in the ass to get out there and back, is what I'm saying. But then I was so lucky, because when I was there, the day that I got there, not that snowy. The night there was snow, and it was just snow is magical. When you see the snow falling, and especially like these big floaty, big flakes, and this, really nice. Then I went out, and the day that I went out, to see the monkeys, it was snowing. It was beautiful. It was not like dangerous or icy. It was just beautiful. I could not have planned that better. Although again, like, would not want to live out there. And also, like, when I was there the week before and the week after, it was just kind of cold and no snow. So the snow is nice, but the snow is a pain in the ass, and you're not getting the nice part that often, and you're still getting the ice, and just did not sound appealing. But anyway, and the monkeys, okay, there's a dude feeding them, I guess, peanuts or something, whatever it is, and that's part of what's keeping them out there. They have so many fucking monkeys on that mountain too. Like, just insane. I'm not a person also who, like, I feel like they're kind of being exploited. Doesn't feel as bad as a zoo, but I feel a little twinge of it. But it was nice. It was worth seeing, and I feel like an ass for having gone, but I also don't regret having gone. But anyway, did that, and one of the things that I did experience at that hotel was as part of it, they're giving you a meal. It's like part of the whole thing. You're like in there, and you just you're wearing your yukata, which I have to say, on one hand, I felt like, is this cultural appropriation? On the other hand, I guess people in Japan are mostly like, they enjoy the fact that people are enjoying their traditional costume a little bit, but I still felt a little twingy. Did look good, I have to say. And especially, like, you wear the thing, and then it had like a little vest that goes over it, and it actually looks pretty fucking solid. I even without being fitted and like properly designed for me, I kind of enjoyed it. But for the meals, they give you so much fucking food, and I felt pressure because you don't want to not eat it, and yet it's like, oh my god, I was very glad that it was not like, if that was an everyday thing, it would be torture to sort of sit there and go like, well, I don't want to disappoint you, but I don't really want this much food, and please, just give me a smaller portion, give me smaller stuff. And it gave me just the tiniest of glimpses into what it must be like to have that sort of social pressure, not to disappoint people, and not to be sort of rude, and having that all the time. I don't think I would like that. I think it would be very difficult, and especially if you didn't quite fit in. If you were gay, or you were trans, or you were, I don't know, you just aren't. If you're the kind of person who doesn't want to wear pants, and all that kind of stuff, Um, if you're not the normal sort of, or you, I mean, not that everybody is like a normal cog that fits in, but if you're the kind of person that's not comfortable with that, it would be very difficult to live there. And as an adult, it's different, although it'd still be, but I'd imagine as a kid, it's probably difficult, probably frustrating. So that was like a little taste of, yeah. But overall, I kept thinking about like I could live here. I don't know that I would necessarily want to stay on a long-term basis, although yeah, I could do it. It would not be that hard. Probably wouldn't want to stay in the summer. I do think I'm going to go back. Well, depending on where money is and all of this, I have different diverging thoughts. If I can make the money work, I kind of want to go to Australia in the summer and or the winter there, and basically not be in Phoenix for the hellish part of the year. I'd also I'm going to be in LA I think for my birthday just because of some plans kind of around that, and then I would go back to Japan later on. I would definitely like to go to Europe at some point and spend some time. I mean, if I could, yeah, I imagine a world where get rid of my car, get rid of my place here, and then I just live in different places for a month or two, and then go back and visit my mom and sister in LA and probably see them more than I'm seeing them now. Because this is a thing. On one hand, you're like, oh, I'm on the other side of the world. On the other hand, I'm in Phoenix. I'm not that far from LA, and yet I never see them. I don't see them that often. So it's not like if I was in Australia or if I was in Paris or if I was in Tokyo, it's not like I would be seeing them that much less often. Now that the flight sucks. 12 hours or 10 hours flight, it's too much. Going to Australia scares me. That flight, like as long as the flight from here to London or from LA to Tokyo this is much longer, and I'm just miserable. Like I literally kind of would like to just be drugged, and or you have the Fifth Element thing where they just knock you out and then you wake up and you're there. That would be nice. Or have a hypersonic transport or something like that. Anyway, rambling on quite a bit. I would. This is how I'm going to close. I went to the coffee shop this morning. I go to Dutch Brothers. Mixed feelings on that company, but it's my habit. Weirdly, that habit, like, I used to take Zona, and years ago, I would take her there and I would park, and then we'd walk up and get a coffee. And then she got older, and getting in and out of the car was hard. So we started driving in the drive-through, and we'd go, and she would get, and just getting that little treat for her it was like a little delight. And I liked the coffee too. And now she's been dead for, I think, like 6 years now, which is crazy. And like half of her life almost, or maybe not even almost. And I'm still like doing this tradition of driving to a Dutch Brothers and waiting in line when I could easily not wait in line in the car. And it's just become my thing. But anyway, I met Dutch Brothers this morning in Tempe, and one of the broistas, which is a weird way to call them, but that's what they're called. One of the broistas was talking to me, and we were just talking about my trip, and he's like, "Oh, after I graduate, I want to do like a gap year where I travel," which I would say definitely do that, but also, I've traveled a bit after school. If I could go back, and one thing that I don't quite regret it, but if I had a kid who was an undergrad, I would totally encourage them to spend a semester abroad, because it's good to travel just in general, but that semester abroad means you're getting months there instead of days or weeks, which is a big difference. And B, you're there with a bunch of other people who are in the same kind of circumstance. You're there with other students, so you're kind of forced to interact. It's a very different experience than, like, if I went to Tokyo and I moved there on my own and I just lived there and I made an effort to engage with people and interact, on the time scale of like years, I would get what you would get in like a month. Like no bullshit. I mean, that's like the difference in concentration. And also like you're older and then things just don't work as well. Now that gap year, you can travel, but you're not going to have the same experience. By all means, do that gap year, but consider the semester abroad as well. And it's just one of these things. I wish people would do that more often. And I wish also, yeah, it's very expensive to travel. I wish it wasn't. Although I will say, getting to Tokyo wasn't cheap. Staying there wasn't cheap, although it wasn't that expensive. But eating there was fucking cheap. And I know the yen is a little bit weak right now, and you could, but it's not just that. It was just cheap. Now you could go someplace like there was a sushi restaurant near me, and I looked at what is it called, Tabelog, the sort of Japanese Yelp, and it's like, oh, typical price for a meal there is like $400. I mean in yen obviously, but like a $400 meal. And I thought about going there, and I was like, oh shit, it looked interesting and good, had good ratings, but a little bit out of my price range. But most places that I went, it was like $6, hundreds, not under 1,000 yen, mostly like 600, 700, and you get a decent chunk of food, and it was good. I went places that were more expensive too, but you could get, if you were there and you didn't have a lot of money to spend on eating, and you had a place to stay and all of this, you could eat pretty cheaply. I kind of was shocked by that. I mean, I definitely noticed in Paris. So in the US, when I've not had that much money, I've tried buying groceries and then cooking at home. I've never found that to be cheaper than eating out, which is weird because although eating out now is getting more expensive, so the economics might have shifted there. But for most of my life, eating out was not cheap, but it was kind of comparable. And you could do something where you're like, okay, well, I'm gonna get this, and I'm gonna be really careful about that. And I'm not saying you can't do it, but for the most part, that's kind of the economics of it. There, I mean, not only was eating out cheap, and probably as cheap as cooking, although cooking you'd probably be making better food and eating better and all that, but it was just so easy and so comfortable and so and then I actually, like, as a single person there on my own, and again, like, there's a negative side to this because there's the loneliness and all of this, but there are so many restaurants where it's like, okay, here's a ramen shop or a soba shop or whatever, and you just go in, and sometimes you get a ticket, sometimes you order, but usually whatever you do, you go in, you have a little alcove for yourself, and it's set up for one person to eat. But you could eat with another person, and they take the like slider out or something, but for the most part it's set up to eat by yourself, and it's so nice. Versus here, I do go to restaurants, like, I tell people this and they're like, well, I go to restaurants by myself all the time. So, yeah, I do too. I go to restaurants a lot by myself here, but I feel, well, more before the pandemic, but even now I'll go out and you'll be on the patio or something, or and you just feel weird. You feel like I don't know. It's the same thing with walking on the street here. It's not that you can't walk on the street here, but you know that people are thinking certain things, and you feel judged a little bit. And yeah, I'm not saying that that's enough to not do it, but it's a thing that you have to counter there, versus, or you have to at least like be okay with it. Versus there, it's like perfectly normal and set up to be super comfortable, and it just, I don't know. I can't say enough good things about that. That was awesome. So with that, it was a good trip overall. I enjoyed it. Definitely made me less fond of the U.S. and partly, I mean, I keep going back and forth. Like, do I stay and try to like work on improving things, or do I just find some place where people are doing stuff a little bit better on average? I don't know what I want to do, but I'm not a huge fan of the way things are now here. And I look at the things and the directions things are going, and I don't feel great about it. So with that, anyway, thank you as always, and 再见.